Tonight, we begin with an internal confrontation so explosive that Western intelligence officials are calling it a red line moment inside the Kremlin, possibly the most serious challenge to Vladimir Putin's military authority since this war began. Because this time, the pushback didn't come from bloggers. It didn't come from leaks. It didn't come from rumors whispered in hallways. It came directly from Putin's own generals to his face. And that alone tells you how bad things really are. In Putin's Russia, challenging the supreme commander has historically meant removal, imprisonment, poisoning, or worse. Fear has always enforced obedience. But this week, fear failed. Senior Russian officers crossed a line every analyst assumed would never be crossed. They told Putin flatly that his strategy is mathematically unsustainable, that the losses cannot be absorbed, that the war cannot continue the way he is demanding. And when that line was crossed, Putin didn't respond the way he always has. He hesitated. If you want to understand how wars actually collapse from the inside, not how they're announced on television, subscribe now. This is one of those moments. The confrontation unfolded during what was supposed to be a routine military briefing inside the Kremlin. Putin sat at the head of the table, demanding continued offensive operations designed to project progress and justify mounting losses. Around him were Russia's most senior commanders, the men who receive casualty reports every morning, the men who sign orders sending soldiers into battle, the men who know exactly how bad things have become. They listened, they reviewed the numbers, and then something unprecedented happened. They pushed back, not with polite hedging, not with cautious language, with blunt statements. Entire units reduced to fractions of their original strength, casualty rates accelerating beyond replacement capacity, veteran soldiers dying faster than new recruits can be trained, equipment losses exceeding domestic production, medical systems overwhelmed, morale collapsing. One officer after another reinforced the same conclusion. This is not pessimism. This is arithmetic. We are losing forces faster than we can replace them. Continuing this strategy guarantees destruction, and Putin, the man known for crushing dissent instantly, did not immediately strike back. That pause is what has intelligence agencies alarmed. Because authoritarian control only works as long as subordinates fear punishment more than they fear the consequences of obedience. And that balance is shifting. If you're still watching, hit subscribe. What happens next depends on moments like this. For months, Western intelligence had seen signs of growing resistance inside Russian military leadership, not publicly quietly. Delayed operations, orders executed half-heartedly, unusual coordination between field commanders, officers suddenly removed or sent on medical leave after questioning directives. Those indicators always point to the same thing. Losses have crossed a threshold even hardened commanders can no longer ignore. And this week, that resistance surfaced openly. Senior officers presented casualty assessments, so severe they reportedly shocked even Putin. Hundreds of thousands lost since the invasion began. Recent offensives producing thousands of casualties, per Dalton Y for negligible territorial gain. Entire brigades hollowed out. Junior officers wiped out, creating command vacuums across the front, when Putin reportedly dismissed the assessments and insisted offensives continue, suggesting commanders who couldn't execute orders could be replaced. The room did not fall silent. Other generals backed the assessment, collectively. That's the part that matters. In authoritarian systems, individual dissent is crushed easily. Collective dissent is dangerous. It offers protection. It spreads. It creates momentum. And Putin knows this. If you're finding this breakdown valuable, subscribe. Again, these are the internal fractures wars are decided on. What followed made the situation even more serious. Putin did not immediately fire anyone. He did not issue public threats. He did not stage arrests. Instead, he ordered additional briefings, requested further reviews, postponed planned offensive announcements. Those are not signs of control. Those are signs of recalculation. Intelligence analysts describe Putin's response as unusually hesitant, visibly surprised, and uncertain how to proceed. That hesitation signals something Putin never wants his inner circle to sense doubt. Because Putin's power rests on the belief that he is decisive, feared, and unchallengeable. The moment that belief weakens, everything else follows. And here's the bind Putin now faces. If he purges his senior generals, he guts the very leadership needed to fight the war. If he backs down, he looks weak. If he ignores them, operations may fail regardless. Every option degrades his control. Defense analysts describe this as an internal corner, a situation where authoritarian leaders historically respond with either accommodation or purges that further weaken capability. Neither path ends well. And this is why intelligence agencies are now asking a question that once seemed unthinkable. Not whether Putin's strategy is failing, that's clear, but whether his control over the military is beginning to fracture. Because when generals stop believing in orders, when fear stops working, when hesitation replaces punishment, the system begins to crack. This story is only beginning. What Putin does next, whether he crushes dissent, adjusts strategy, or doubles down, will determine not just the next phase of this war, but the stability of his rule itself, and we'll be watching every move as it unfolds. And this is where the situation turns from military disagreement into something far more dangerous for the Kremlin. Because once senior commanders challenge orders openly, the damage doesn't stay inside one room. It spreads through the ranks. It leaks into unit behavior. It changes how orders are followed or are quietly ignored. Western intelligence monitoring Russian communications after that meeting noticed something immediate and disturbing. Not tighter coordination, not renewed discipline, but hesitation. Orders delayed. Operations slowed. Units digging in deeper than instructed. Commanders choosing caution over aggression. That's not defiance yet, but it's no longer obedience either. If you want to understand how authoritarian systems actually unravel, subscribe. Now, this is the phase most people miss. What makes this pushback unprecedented is that it wasn't emotional. It wasn't political. It was technical, mathematical. The generals didn't argue ideology. They argued numbers, casualty rates, replacement timelines, equipment loss curves, training bottlenecks. Those arguments are lethal to political narratives because they can't be spun away. When commanders say, we cannot replace what we are losing, that's not opinion, that's physics. And that's why this moment terrified analysts, because fear has always been Putin's enforcement. Fear of punishment, fear of removal, fear of death. But fear stops working when the alternative is annihilation of your forces. At that point, obedience becomes irrational. If you're still watching, hit like and subscribe. This is where internal power shifts begin. Since that confrontation, intelligence agencies have observed a subtle but critical change across the front. Russian units are increasingly prioritizing survival over orders. Defensive postures are hardening. Attacks are being delayed under the pretext of logistics. Commanders are requesting clarifications instead of executing immediately. Those behaviors signal doubt at the top, and doubt in a centralized command system is contagious. Mid-level officers take cues from senior leadership. When generals hesitate, colonels hesitate. When colonels hesitate, captains improvise. When captains improvise, cohesion breaks. This is how control erodes without a single announcement. Putin understands this. And that's what makes his hesitation so dangerous for him, because he cannot easily punish everyone who spoke up. He needs them. He needs their signatures, their experience, their authority over exhausted units. Purging them would cripple what's left of his war effort, but allowing them to stand sets a precedent. And precedents are poison in authoritarian systems. If you're finding this breakdown valuable, subscribe again. What happens next will move fast. Inside the Kremlin, this has created a silent standoff. Putin wants obedience restored without appearing weak. The generals want strategic change without becoming scapegoats. Neither side can fully retreat. That tension doesn't resolve cleanly. Historically, when military leadership resists political orders under authoritarian rule, outcomes follow a familiar pattern. Either leadership adapts strategy to reality, or it doubles down and purges, weakening the military even further. Both paths accelerate decline. Analysts have already begun comparing this moment to late-stage Soviet Afghanistan, when generals increasingly delayed or modified orders they knew would destroy their units. There was no dramatic mutiny, just quiet resistance that hollowed the system from within. That process ended an empire. And this is why Western intelligence is watching so closely now. Because once military confidence breaks, recovery is rare. If you're still here, subscribe. One more time. Moments like this don't repeat. Putin's greatest strength has always been the perception of absolute control, not just power, but inevitability. The belief that resistance is futile, that obedience is the only option. That belief cracked, not on the battlefield, not on television, inside his own command structure. And cracks like that don't seal themselves. So bring this back to the moment that started it all. A closed room, senior commanders, casualty numbers laid bare, and Putin confronted with a reality he can no longer intimidate away. When generals stop saying yes, the system enters a new phase. No one knows yet whether this becomes adaptation, purge, or something far worse. But one thing is already clear. Putin is no longer commanding unquestioned obedience. And once that's gone, everything else follows. This story is far from over. We'll be watching every move as the next phase unfolds.